Whitney Houston Obituary. Few pop singers have been gifted with a voice as glorious as Whitney Houston's, and even fewer have treated their talent with the frustrating indifference she did toward the end of her life. She sold more records and received more awards than almost any other female pop star of the 20th century, but spent most of her last years mired in a drug addiction that sapped her will to sing and left her in a shambolic state. Her death at the age of 48 will send her albums back into the charts and introduce her music to a generation who know her only as a troubled character who commercials such as peaked in the 1990s. Thought never edgy as a musician, her skills were often wasted on bland adult contemporary songs. She was more than just a provider and anodyne chart hits. Houston was lauded by other vocalists for her impeccable technique and polish qualities that elevated her above almost every other stars of the era. Houston was gospel trained, but her voice also lent itself to R&B, pop and ballads, and her was adapted to each styles. It was a ballad that provided her biggest hit, a 1992 cover version of Dolly Parton's I Will Always Love You. Her melodramatic rendition, featuring one of the most powerful vocals, sold 12 million copies worldwide, making it one of the biggest singles of the time. Her total record sales topped 170 million, putting her in an elite group of female superstars that includes Mariah Carey and Celine Dion, both of whom were heavily influenced by her emotional vibration styles. Houston often gravitated to dramatic songs with lyrics about triumphing over the odds, and she has been credited with inventing the pop diva genre that has inspired singers to present day. She was also the first black woman to break through the color bar of the all-important MTV, which her top had played with artists almost exclusively. The station's heavy rotation of the videos made her a familiar face to Middle America, and her mix of glamour, talent, and approachability made her an inspiration figure for millions of teenager girls, both black and white. A U.S. magazine editor dubbed her the first black American with her hair. Houston's success made her rich, enabling her to maintain a cocaine habit that kept from her making records for years at a time in her 30s and 40s. Looking back on her addiction after kicking in the late 2000s, she said paying for it has been easy as there was so much money. But her didn't think about the singing party anymore, and when she returned to turning, the neglect showed. She was unable to get through concert without breathlessness and frequent halts. Her comeback tour in 2010 was marred by reviews claiming she was unfit to be on stage, and a clip of her sounding wobbly at a gig in Birmingham was played on the TV news. Houston was born in Newark, New Jersey, to a musician family. She was the daughter of the gospel star Cissy Houston, a cousin of Dionne Warwick and good daughter of Aretha Franklin. She began singing in her church choir at the age of 11 and as a young teenager occasionally performing at her mother's concerts. Her voice attracted attention, and when she was 15, she and Cissy sang backup on Chaka Khan's 1978 hit I'm Every Woman. She went on to provide vocals for Lou Rawls and Jermaine Jackson and simultaneously develop a sideline in modeling. Her fresh face prettiness made her a success in front of the camera, and she was the second black model to appear on the cover of the American magazine 17 in 1981, when black faces were a rarity in fashion magazine. Even 17 hedged its best by putting a white model next to her in the photo. By her late teens, Houston has been a featured vocalist on albums by the disco songwriter Paul Jabara and the avant-garde New York funk outfit Material. By then, her style was fully formed on the Material track Memories. The richness of her tone was balanced by a poise and a precision that was uncanny in a teenager. Inevitably, she was offered record deals and signed with the Arista label, where she stayed for the rest of her life. Convinced that she had what it took to be a blockbusting star, Arista's influential president Clive Davis personally oversaw the recording of her first album. She also turned up with her in 1983 on the Mary Griffin Chat Show, where she was introduced to the American public. She sang Home from the soundtrack of The Wits, and her vocals were flawless, but the promptly ruffled dress and the short natural hair didn't project what Aristas considered the right sustainable image. By the time her first album came out in 1985, she had been given a total makeover. The cover photo showed a sleek, hairy, golden skinned hilf wearing an elegantly dropped wig gown. Whitney Houston, as a debut was titled, was praised not for the music, which was an exceptional dance pop, so much as for the promise the 21-year-old singer showed. Obviously headed for stardom, practiced Rolling Stone magazine. It sold 3 million copies in the US in its first year and eventually about 25 million globally. It also won a Grammy Award, the first of 6 in her career. The next few years saw her break the Beatles' records for the greatest number of number one singles in a row. She managed 7 and became America's highest earning black female entertainer. Her ubiquity on radio and TV paved the way for other African American singers and groups such as Mary J. Blige and Destiny's Child, who became hugely popular. Her accessibility to all age and cultural backgrounds helped less easily marketed artists like Blige, but as culturally significant as she was, Houston was primarily an entertainer. Despite occasional involvement in issues such as the fight against apartheid, which saw her a part of the concert for Nelson Mandela's 17th birth, and was not an activist. Whatever her private view on politics and race, her public self was always poised and wholesome. Ironically, a venture into a more urban, soulful sound on the 1990 album I'm Your Baby Tonight elicited a skeptical reaction from some black critics. Commercially, her most brainstorming project was the 1992 film The Bodyguard. Kevin Costner played the titular guard, while Houston played a film star and sang on the soundtrack. Her acting won her a Razzie Award from Worst Actress, which did not deter her from making several more films and getting better reviews. But the soundtrack became the biggest album of the career, selling 44 million copies and spawning I Will Always Love You. The song was inescapable, spending 14 weeks at #1 in the US, the roasting at the top of nearly every other pop chart in the world. The same year, she married ex-boy band member Bobby Brown, who came to be widely blamed for her downward spiral. The princess married the bad boys. Houston weirdly described the union years later. The marriage produced her only child, Bobby Christina, but Brown was jealous of his wife's success and was emotionally abusive. The drug use began around that time, and by the 1996 she was a daily user. She made one other album that decade, the well-reviewed My Love Is Your Love, 1998, but by the turn of the century stories about her behavior were rife. Houston turning up later from events or missed them altogether, was dropped as a performer at the 2000 Oscar because she was out of it at rehearsals, was arrested for marijuana possession, and looked skeletal at the Michael Jackson tribute in 2001. Promoting her 2002 album Just Whitney, she told a TV interviewer, "Crack is cheap, I make too much money to even smoke crack. We don't do crack, crack is rock." But she was freebasing cocaine, and she decade went on. She was photographed looking disheveled and frighteningly haggard. She and Brown would spend a week at a time taking drugs and watching TV, she later said. In her adult state, she agreed to appear on a reality show called Being Bobby Brown 2005, and succeeded in losing the last remnants of her dignity, telling her husband in one episode, "I need to poop a poop." Even in a decade in which celebrity regularity suffered humiliation falls from grace, Houston's was shocking. Narcotics and her toxic relationship with Brown revenged her looks and robbed her voice on its ability to soar. Her mother forced her into rehab in 2006, and the following year, Houston divorced Brown. Her last album, I Look to You, came out in 2009 to generally positive reviews. Her name still retained enough star power to sell out most of the gigs on the tour promoting it, but many fans complained that her voice was not longer up to the rigors of touring. In May 2011, Houston underwent a far further period of rehab. Last autumn, she returned to acting for a remake with the American Idol winner Johnny Sparks of the 1976 film Sparkle. Filming of the story of the effects of female and drugs on a singing group of three sisters was completed recently. Houston was found dead, the cause not immediately clear, in a hotel room in Los Angeles, where she had gone for Davis' pre-Grammy party. That should happen after so many wasted years comes as a sad contrast to her guilty years as an American sweetheart. She is survived by her mother, two brothers, and her daughter.